Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is James Scholder, and he had a very painful near-death experience. Hi, James.
Hey,
So start wherever you like and take as long as you like. Okay?
well, I think I should first clarify that it wasn't really a near-death experience. I was brain dead for quite a few days. I was attached to, I was flown from back in Connecticut where the accident happened. I was in a head-on collision. I was in a Ford Escort and was hit by a F-350, and they rolled over me, and I became one with the car. It took them over an hour and a half to extract me, and in that time, I pretty much bled out. So by the time the EMTs came and Life Flight came, they brought just all the blood they could. But by the time I got to Boston, they life flighted me from Connecticut to Boston General, and they immediately put me on what's called an ECMO machine. It circulates your blood and your oxygen. They insert tubes into your arteries and put in an artificial pacemaker, an external one, and they intubate you in lungs, tubes in your lungs. Uh, my the seatbelt had broken my ribs and put the ribs into the lining of my heart and punctured both lungs, as well as the kidneys, the every liver, everything was lacerated. And they gave me, well, my face also had a Lafort 3 fracture, and that's the equivalent of dropping a 10-pound bowling ball from 10 feet onto your face. So I basically gave myself a lobotomy, and just that injury alone is a 20% survival rate. And if you do live, you're in a coma, you're vegetative, or you have severe impairment. My IQ increased by 20 points. I can't explain that, neither can the doctors. There is, I won't even try to explain how I came out of it anyway. You know, I don't remember anything about the accident whatsoever. July 22nd, nice warm summer day. I had gone and collected some sweet fern, which we used to use as an insect repellent, gathered up the stuff in the garden and all the trash from around the house, and I was on the way to the dump, stopped at the convenience store for some gas and some milk, and got back on the road. And next thing I know, when I become conscious, I'm just in a hospital bed with tubes coming everywhere. I'm not breathing on my own, and I had no idea what had happened and what was. But like I said, I don't remember the collision whatsoever.
What year
Whatsoever.
was this?
1995.
Okay.
This is 32 years ago, July 22nd. Um, they called in surgeons from all around the hospital, all around the country, all around the nation, as a matter of fact. We had people from England, from France, from Italy come in to work on me. They flew in to Boston General because Boston General at the time had the only ECMO machine that was cleared for human trials. And they'd never tried it on a case like mine. They use it now regularly for heart transplants and lung transplants, major surgeries like that. But they'd never tried it on just a freshly, I don't know how to put it, but a
Hmm.
freshly deceased body. I had no reflex action, so they were free to do whatever they wanted without the body responding. And that's why they did such extensive work. Uh, the X-rays are incredible. There's at least 50 pieces of titanium that hold my face together alone, and face and jaws and the whole bit. Jaw was ripped off. But what I do remember, my first, I don't know if you could even call it a conscious thought. It was just knowing. I was like, if you look at a picture from one of the space telescopes, of the cosmos, it was just like being surrounded by that. and being part of it all. It was a warm, comforting, beautiful experience. Um, I didn't see any bright light. I didn't see any tunnel. I didn't see any people. If I focused my, I guess, thought, um, I could see specific points in time and people, but it was like being in eternity. There really was no time. It was like a Mobius loop, and you're in the center of it. And but it wasn't chaos. It was just a very comforting, warm, loving, complete feeling. I guess that's the best way to call it, was feeling complete.
What do you mean when you saw points in time, people?
If I thought, you know, about a specific person or point in time, then I could, you know, it was like a flash. You know, it was just there, and you know, you knew it. You were there, and like I said, eternity to me is a strange thing because time is forward and backwards at the same time. Um, it's it's really irrelevant, but I could pinpoint certain points in time. Um, and all, you know, I mean, and there was it. If you have any idea about string theory, it's kind of like that. You know, I could see all possibilities, all past and futures. It was not, like I said, it wasn't confusing. It was very comforting. And I didn't, you know, have any questions because there were, you know, I didn't have any questions to answer. There were just, you know, it was like being complete. And I wish I could have brought some of that, more of that back with me. Um, it was the most wonderful feeling that you can imagine. I mean, if there was a shortcut back, I would have found it by now, but there isn't. You can't cheat life. You know, life is life. God doesn't take you, you know, as far as people, you know, and say, why did God take him? You know, God, I don't believe God does that kind of thing. That's just my personal belief. Life takes you, and you have no control over that. You can have an aneurysm in a second, and you wouldn't know it. Or you could succumb to cancer and kind of know your time. But we really don't know when. And, you know, to me, it's like God accepts. If you have a concept of a God, a higher power, he accepts, or she accepts, or it accepts. Um, but it doesn't take you. You know, it it's. I think personally that we all have our own heaven and our own hell, and we develop that ourselves through our own beliefs and our own, you know, our own faiths, our own whatever. Uh, and even if you don't have a belief or a faith, then, you know, whatever your concept of the next is what is manifested. Um, I mean, energy never dissipates, and I believe that we are basically energy, made of energy, and that energy is what leaves us when we die, and it becomes part of the whole. These are my personal beliefs. And to me, that was what it was like. I just became part of the whole. And it was more comforting beyond comparison, you know, just complete love and understanding and no questions, no fear, no, you know, it was just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And like I said, I can, I still can see possibilities in people, you know. Um, when I meet them, and if I really want to look deep enough, I can kind of see where they could go, you know, how their life could progress one direction or the other. And, you know, my friends, I try to guide them in all good things. I support them in all good things. and I try to steer them away from things that I can see are harming them. And like I said, possibilities on top of possibilities. You know, but like I said, it wasn't chaos at all. It was just complete understanding of everything.
How
Like I
long
said,
did it feel like you were there?
an eternity.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd always been there. I'd always be there. I'd always been there. You know, it just, I was. There was no sense of time whatsoever.
Was there any
Uh,
words said to you or
no, no words, no anything. Everything was, there was no physicality whatsoever, except if I wanted to focus on a pinpoint of time or whatever, or something, you know, then there was an image, but it was not. It was like watching a movie screen, you know. It wasn't physical. Um, but from that experience, I was just as instantly as I was there, I was not there, and I was in a different reality that was the complete opposite. It was very visceral, very physical. It was torment, it was pain, it was doubt, it was being beat into submission, it was being ridiculed, it was hell. It was my hell. And I mean, visceral. I could see a hand reaching in and just tearing out organs, saying you don't need these. And I just, you know, I was confused. I really didn't understand, you know, what was going. I couldn't move. I was bound, pretty much. Like if you think of Prometheus, you know, bound to the rock, and the vulture comes and eats the kind of like that, you know. And it was like they wanted me to succumb. They wanted me to give up. They wanted me to give in. And I am not that kind of person. I never have been. Um, if if I if it's something I really want for myself personally, whether it's knowledge or something, building myself up physically or whatever, you know, I go after it until I attain it or I can't. And that the second eternity was just like that. You know, it was you can't. It's what I, you know, and like I said, it was torment. It was questions. It was doubt. It was, you know, the complete polar opposite of where I had just been for an eternity. And then again, this other place was an eternity. I'd been there forever. I'd be there forever. And I could not accept that. I could not accept the fact that that is where I was going to be in that kind of pain. And I wasn't going to give up. I was not going to give up. I just kept thinking, this is not for me. This is not where I'm supposed to be. This is not where I will be. And so I'm not sure how it really came about, but as best as I can recall, I just, I could feel the power from my higher power in myself. And I just screamed, no, no. And it was like it was like almost a split, a schism, you know? It was like, if I do go, I knew that I would be in pain the rest of my life, and that I would have to suffer through a agonizing recovery because of all that had been done, you know, happened to my body. And I accepted it. And so I just said, you know, screamed, no. And Like I
So
said,
you
my neck.
remember the accident while you were there.
No, I don't remember the accident whatsoever.
Mhm.
I just,
But
I,
like you knew if you come back because of what happened to you, your body would be,
yeah, yeah, in pain.
yeah.
It was like, it was almost a trade-off. Like, yeah, you can, but, and I was like, well, anything's better than this. It's got to be, nothing can be worse than this. And I don't accept this. And I said, well, you're going to take this pain with you, but you're not, you're going to be free. And
So,
I
so
did.
this wasn't a voice, this was like an understanding. You
An
just,
understanding, yes, yeah. And but like I said, I called on the strength of my higher power that was in me. Um, I didn't do it myself. Yeah, I want to make that clear. And I also want to make clear that I'm no Jesus, no Messiah, and I'm not, yes, I was brain dead for about 4.5 days. And when they unplugged me from the ECMO, when they were done, they only had a limited time they could work on me. So after that time, they pulled the plug and they called time of death. And about 5 seconds later, my brain blipped. And like I said, there's no explanation for it. The doctors that were working on me were some of the best anywhere. And they had no clue why I blipped up again. But they waited till I had a steady sinus rhythm, and then they induced coma and went back to do some more work on me. And because once my body started functioning again, they were able to, and they worked on me for a while. Um, After they induced coma, they rebuilt my shoulder that had been partially amputated with no metal whatsoever, bone glue and surgical twine. They bracketed up my pelvis. They, like I said, the facial reconstruction. If you ever look at a Fort 3 facial reconstruction, look at the diagrams. Don't look at the pictures. You'll have nightmares. The 10-pound bowling ball dropped from 10 feet is not a pretty sight. Your face is squashed like a grape. But they did an amazing job. I'm looking in the camera now. I can see some of the scars that, you know, were, it's worth the scars, but they did an amazing job rebuilding me. And, uh, and I healed very quickly. What the organs that were damaged, they gave 3 months to mend, and it took about 3 weeks. And so and I have no explanation for that. Neither do they. It's just one of those things that happen. And
we hear that a
but
lot in near-death experiences. Like if you have an NDE, it seems like you're going to have a very rapid, miraculous healing.
mhm.
Even like stuff grow
Well,
back that doesn't grow back.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the thing, I was supposed to have brain damage. My face basically gave me a lobotomy, a frontal lobotomy, and they were amazed that I was even cognitive. When they took me out of coma, they're expecting me to, be irrational and all that. But when they did take me out of coma, it took a they let me be awake for about, they started at 5 minutes at a time, because every time I was awake, my body would become conscious of what my brain would become conscious of what my body had gone through, and it'd go into shock and start shutting things down. So they'd give me a slam of Demerol and knock me out again. And I finally worked up to about 15 minutes at a time before I was able to ask what happened. Because my jaw was wired shut. My arms were both in casts. I had sheared off both elbows, and broken, my left arm, and it went through my my scapula back there, and just was basically torn off. But they reconstructed it, like I said, without any metal, which is amazing. They didn't put in an artificial hip because the pelvis wouldn't support it. I was in a wheelchair for 2 years before the pelvis could support an artificial hip. And even then, nobody wanted to touch it. I had it done through the UC system, UC San Diego, UC California.
Okay.
And because it was an experimental, because they're a teaching hospital, they have access to all kinds of things that most hospitals aren't. And so every one of my hips has been a prototype, and I've had four of them. The last one they put, I keep dislocating them. I have hyperflexation, so I dislocate them all the time. And every time was the same thing, you know the risks. May not work, you may die, you know, maybe in a wheelchair. So I was already in a wheelchair, so it didn't matter. And the fourth one they put in was a locking hip. It looked like a wiffle ball that had complete rotation, and you couldn't dislocate it. And that model now I've had for 20 years. They were giving it a 10 to 15-year life. And after 10 years, they reevaluated me and all that. And now it's the standard working hip for athletes, for younger people that are very active. Um, so, I'm I'm in pain, yes, every day. Level 7 to 8 pain all of the time, every minute. And I've learned to make friends with my pain. Um, either I accept it and deal with it, or it'll kill me. And I'm not ready to die, not that way.
Hmm.
And I take very little pain medication, very little. It's just a matter of acceptance and learning to, after 32 years, people have asked me, what wouldn't you like to be pain free? And I have to honestly tell them, no, I'd miss it. Pain has become my friend. Pain lets me know that I'm alive. Pain lets me know when something is wrong. Um, I know it's wrong all of the time, but I get like pain du jour. Every day something else flares up and hurts, and and I just accept it and deal with it. And a lot of meditation. It's almost like constantly meditating.
Where is your pain?
Oh, point. It's there.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, my hip, my left uh, humeral socket. I mean, femoral socket. My shoulder. It was pretty torn up, and I grew back some extra bone, stuff like that,
Oh,
almost like a wing. Um,
uh,
they don't know why it grew back like that, but
huh.
it did. Um, but that hurts. My face hurts. When
Oh,
the barometric pressure changes, bone is porous, so it expands and contracts. Titanium does not expand and contract. It holds in place. I think I showed you a picture of my face. I sent you a
uh-huh.
photo of it. And so every time the pressure changes, it hurts. And when I go outside, if it's too hot, the titanium is like a heat sink, so it absorbs the heat. Um, and when that happens, I put my face in the freezer for a bit to cool it down. And then the opposite, if I'm in cold weather, the titanium will absorb the cold, so it can cause frostbite of the bone. That's why I had to leave the East Coast. They told me I couldn't live on the East Coast anymore. It would just be too cold and
Uh,
run into severe complications. So my family was in San Diego anyway. So I moved back to California and did all my recovery there, the secondary recovery. I was in the hospital for from July to November.
wow.
Um, October, in October, I was moved to a quote unquote rehabilitation hospital, which was just a place to go and die, um, until I could get back home to where I lived.
How long was you in the um Rehabilitation hospital.
I was there for about a month.
Okay.
Yeah, my wife had said that the house wasn't ready, wheelchair, ready.
Hmm.
That wasn't exactly true because the people who built it as their retirement home. She just was still in shock from the accident itself. They called her to identify my body on, that night. They called her about 10 o'clock when they finally were able to, track down a phone number. And, she said, well, they told her we need you to come identify the body. Mind you, she's 2.5 hours away. So she said, well, is he still alive? And they said, yes. And she said, well, then I'll be there in the morning. But if he does die, you have my permission to do whatever you need to do. And so when she came to identify me, I had changed pressure. My ears, because of reconstruction, my ears are sensitive to pressure. When she did come down to identify my body, she couldn't identify me. I I was tore up, and my face was swollen so much that you couldn't see the eyes. The nose was just, two holes, and the mouth was almost completely covered. Just and that was before they took my face off. They did, stitched under here, and then around the eyes and all that, and just peeled it off, and. And then when I asked how they did it, and the doctor started describing what they did, I just kind of went, "Okay, it's enough for me. I get the picture. No more. I get it." Um, but they did, like I said, they did an amazing job of for my facial reconstruction. But I still, it seems like that when I did come back, I took a piece of both. I'll call it my heaven and my hell. I brought a piece of those with me, and it's still very real in my mind, very real. Um, I long for my my heaven, and I envy people that have passed because I know that they're where I want to be, and people really kind of don't they have a hard time grasping my view of death.
Yeah.
Even when my father passed, I wasn't sad. I was envious. I miss him physically, but I know that he's here. Eternity is eternity. I'm already dead in eternity, and I also haven't been born yet. So it's a confusing kind of thing for to try to think through. It really is, and to explain even. But I know that my father's physically not here, and I wish he was to give me a hug. But he's right here, and if I listen, he will guide me. You know. Same with my grandma. She died ages ago. And when I'm in the kitchen cooking, I hear her because we owned a restaurant for 29 years downtown San Diego. So I'm cooking. I could hear her in my ear saying, try this, try that, and it's a very comforting feeling knowing that they've passed physically, but they haven't passed. They're right there, and that's why instead of grieving, I'm kind of envious. I and the grieving is just for myself. I think that grieving someone who has died is for your own
Yeah.
selfish reason.
Yeah.
You know, um, they don't. They're fine. You're already there with them. It's you're you're with them already. And if you can kind of wrap your head around that, then it makes their passing much easier. Um, I don't know. It's been a strange experience the last 32 years. I've had, you know, other surgeries done since then. My duodenum and my intestines were severely. Duodenum is the valve between your stomach and your intestines, and mine was severely damaged by the seatbelt. The seatbelt broke the ribs and put them into the organs. Also, really damaged my stomach and the intestines, and split my pelvis. Uh, it was the impact was only 45 miles an hour, but it's like coming to a dead stop at 180 miles an hour. Physics is wonderful.
Now,
So my
everybody in the
body
truck
was
was okay, right?
the truck. There were three passengers in the truck. They didn't have their seatbelts on. They had a transmission and two motors in the back. It was an F-350. It was a heavy duty truck. They were coming down one of the inclines, and I was coming up, and so they went on their side. The truck went on its side. I bent the frame 15 degrees. I mean, it was not a small hit, but they weren't hurt a bit, not a single scratch. The only scratches they got were when they kicked out the windshield to get out, and they crawled out the windshield and they got some scratch. Otherwise, they were fine, even without seat belts. I received all of it. I received the entirety of it. When the first officers came on the scene, um, I talked to one of the officers. He came to give me a $35 ticket because Connecticut's a no fault state, so they had to find somebody to blame, and so they said we both made an illegal left-hand turn. Well, it's a two-lane road back into back country, so there's nowhere to turn. It's just, and there was car and truck all over the place, so they really couldn't determine what happened. There were no brake marks, there were no skid marks, except for where the car was turned. And so anyway, he came to give me my $35 ticket, and he just looked at me for a minute, and he couldn't believe that it was me. And he says, "I can't believe that too." He says, "Did you know that when I first arrived there, the first thing I did was put your eye back into its socket?" And I was like, "Okay, thank you. I'm done with that."
Ugh,
And he, was asking about my cats. He was asking about my wife. And I said, "How do you know all this?" He says, "Well, even though your jaw had been torn down, you were still we were still talking."
wow.
And I remember none of it. None of it. And but he knew, you know,
Huh.
I'm not, I that part has been purposely, I believe, been purposely put back there, locked away, because of it was, I think if I were to remember it, it would be very detrimental. I've had psychiatrists, suggest, regression hypnosis, bring you back to that point, and
Yeah.
I'm like, no, the reason I don't remember it is for a good reason.
Mhm.
I don't want to remember it. I don't want to remember or feel what that kind of pain would be like. I sent you pictures of the car. It was just destroyed, you know, and all that happened to my body, I can't even imagine
Now,
what
weren't they going to take your organs like when you was in a coma those first few days before you come back?
well, they worked on me while I was on the ECMO, and the organs, they couldn't really go inside and do anything. You can't mend a punctured lung. Um, it's just time for it has to heal on its own. And if I were to have died, they would have harvested organs because they were still fresh because of the ECMO. But uh, they they didn't get a chance. Once they unplugged the ECMO and started taking the tubes out and called time, I have a death certificate on file at Boston General It's never been submitted to the state. It's on file because they did call time. So when they started, like I said, when they started taking the tubes, you get about 8 tubes all over your body, different arteries that circulate the blood. And so when they pulled the plug, called time. And then, like I said, about 3 to 5 seconds later, my brain blipped and I had no brain activity. That's why they were able to do what they did, because I had no reflex action. And so when I did blip, it kind of surprised them. And they thought, well, it could be just a fluke. But it started a steady rhythm. And that's when they induced coma and just kind of sat back and, you know, observed what was going on. And once I was in a steady sinus rhythm and in coma, they went back and did some more work on me. And I woke up 3 weeks later. About 3 weeks later, um, and I remember just extreme pain, and I had a pin through my left knee, and it was in traction to pull it out from the hip because the femoral head had gone through the femoral socket. It just destroyed it and took a lot of that side of the pelvis with it, and that's why they bracketed it up. It looks like titanium plumber's tape. Um, but it took a while for me to get to the point where I could be awake without my body going into going into shock. And when I got past that point, I was on morphine for a long time. Um, and the pain from the recovery was excruciating. I mean, for like a week straight, it felt like I had ice cubes in my ears because they had rebuilt all of this, everything,
Oh,
and and the pain was just beyond imagination for me. I didn't think that the pain could hurt that much, and I no matter how much morphine or you know if I was conscious, it hurt, and that's when I learned to start dealing with pain because it wasn't going away. I knew that I wouldn't be, I'd never be pain free again.
and I think your wife kind of abandoned you then, didn't she?
Yeah. 1 week after I was out of the hospital, I was in a wheelchair, and she saw that I could transfer wheelchair to bed, shower, toilet. I could stand on one leg and cook and clean. A very good cook, by the way. Going up in a restaurant, it's one of my passions. And she just, I think the shock was just too traumatic for her, and she just couldn't look at me without seeing that face. When she came to identify me, it was I. If you ever do look at a picture of a Laporte 3, it's messy. It'll give you nightmares. It's I don't even look at them. But yeah,
How,
she did leave,
how did
and
you rebuild your life?
I'm a stubborn sob. Just like leaving, where I was. I was determined. The doctors told me to get an electric wheelchair. Well, I told them all about themselves, their family, and where they're going to go. You know, and they said I'd have 30% use of my left arm. And again, I told them about themselves. And I kept reminding him that they have a practice, not a know it all. So don't tell me what you don't know. Maybe that's by the book, but I'm not by the book at all. Um, at nighttime, I would grab a wheelchair, when nurses were resting, and everything was quiet, I'd grab a wheelchair and just pump up and down the halls to get my arm working and flexible. Um, like I said, I have hyperflexibility, so I went through the pain. Had staples, still had staples all through, but I just went through the pain of rebuilding it. When I went into hospital, I was 150 pounds. When I came out, I was 115.
Oh.
And so I couldn't accept the atrophy that had happened. I used to surf, I used to free climb, I used to do all kinds of things. And I couldn't accept the way my body was. And I would not accept that I'd be in a wheelchair. And that's why after the pelvis had knitted enough to be able to take an artificial hip, I had to shop around for somebody to do it. And nobody wanted to touch it. They were like, there's nothing left to work on. But UCSD out here in Hillcrest, San Diego, there was a Dr. Convery, an older guy, and he was head of orthopedics there. And he says, well, we got this prototype we can throw in. It was his last surgery before he retired, moved to the Bahamas with his wife. And I was like, all right, well, let's give it a shot. And I remember the day of the operation, I was in pre-op, and he put the X-ray up on the thing, and he was showing me, what they were going to do. And I looked at the X-ray and I said, "Excuse me, it's the left hip, not the right hip." And he says, "Oh, okay." And he just took the X-ray, pulled it down, flipped it over, put it back up. He says, "Okay, now this is what we're going to do." And I was just like, "Slow down, buddy. Bahamas aren't going anyplace. Let's just take it a piece at a time." And that lasted about a year. And then they put a second prototype that they had been working on. Mine was an extreme case because of the damage done to the pelvis. An artificial femur is easy to put in. You just remove the bone that is no good, and you hammer in a titanium femur. But the socket is the tricky part, because you have to put that into the pelvis, and the pelvis has to be able to support it. This fourth one I have, if something ever goes wrong with it, it's done with. There's no more bone to work with. Um, but I believe that if this ever does fail, and I don't think it will, but if it ever does, they'll have something. They'll have developed something by now. Like it was, how long ago was it? I've had this about 20 years, the fourth one. And that the other three, well, the first one lasted about a year. The second one lasted about 2 years. The third one, on its third year, dislocated 4 times about every month at the same time of the month, 4 months. And after the fourth dislocation, I said, "You got to do something." And he says, and Dr. Bugby, his Convery's replacement, said, there's nothing we can do. And I said, "Okay, well, if you can't do anything, I'll go find somebody else." I'm sure there's a lot of surgeons who like to get a hold of me. So, because I do heal very quickly. And he says, "Okay, well, we have this other prototype, so we can try it." And I said, "Okay, whatever, let's try it." I, I was not going to be in a wheelchair again. I was determined to walk. And like when I was at Boston General, before they released me to the rehabilitation hospital, I told them I'm walking out of here. And they said, "Hey, no, you're not." And I said, "Yeah, yes, I am." And so they took me to the front door in the wheelchair. Told them, "Stop, just stop here." And I got up and took 6 very, very, very painful steps outside and flopped back down into a wheelchair and got loaded into the car that took me home. And But I walked out of that hospital. I'm just the kind of person that has the kind of determination and will that I don't believe in the impossible. I
What's
don't.
your mobility like now?
I can walk. I can't run. I lost some muscle tissue. They took out half of my butt. It was just tore up. Um, so they had to take it out. I can't, when I run, my left foot turns inward because the muscles stopping it from doing that are gone.
Oh,
But, but like when I go to the zoo, the San Diego Zoo, I can walk 2 miles. And of course it hurts. It hurts right now sitting down. Um, Hurts a little more after I walk, but it takes about 2 days to recover to an acceptable level of pain.
mhm.
But it's worth it. You know, everything
Like
I do.
now you're remarried, right?
No,
Oh,
no,
okay. Thought you were okay.
no. I went through after my wife left, and I had moved to San Diego. We divorced, and I got married again a few days later. A few years later, I remarried, and that really didn't work out well either.
Oh, okay.
And so, yeah, I'm single, and I'm happy and
So
content.
when did you start talking about your experience or processing
For
it?
a long, I didn't talk about it for a long time because I didn't know how to actually explain it. The words to describe and go about telling about what happened. You know, I really so I've never been ashamed or frightened or I've always welcomed questions because it makes me think about it. Thinking you know what you know I know what I experienced. And a lot of people don't believe it. You didn't see a white light, you didn't see whatever. I don't care what people think. I went through it. I know what was real. I know what
Right.
happened. I was there.
Why do you think you had the two very different experiences, the heaven, the hellish?
To me, it was kind of like showing me the the polar opposites and my choices, of what could be, you know, and well, for everyone, it could be for, I'm really not sure why I had both sides, the duality, the yin yang of it, I'm really not sure. I can't, that's a question that I can't answer. I don't know why. I don't know why anything in the first place. I don't know why I got hit by a truck. I
Right.
don't, I have no recollection of any of it. There was no drugs, no alcohol, nothing involved. Bright, beautiful Saturday morning, you know. So I really have no idea. All I know is that what I experienced was absolutely true and real. And
I know I've thought before, if people say, "Oh, this was so beautiful and there was so much love and I didn't want to come back." And I thought, I'm the type little spoilt brat person that if I was shown something really great, I wouldn't have thought to come back. I would have been, hi.
well, I had no choice. Like I said, I went to my heaven first, and then I experienced my hell afterwards. And so it was not my choice. It was kind of I refused to stay in the torment. I knew that I just knew inside me that I did not belong there. That I could that I could get out. It cost me a lot, but I could get out, and it was worth the price. It was a unconscious, conscious decision. And yes, the recovery was hell. It was torment. I my mother and my sister came out from San Diego to claim my body, and I didn't die. So they were there for about a month, and my mom put this necklace that I still wear on me, and she whispered in my ear, she says, "I'm not going to bury my son." She says, "Promise me I'm not going to bury my son." And I said, "Oh, okay, I promise you." And that's pretty much what kept me going, and does keep me going. She's 94 years old and not in great health, but I've kept my promise. I've gone through all these other surgeries, and I've had the duodenum and 8 feet of intestine removed, and a bracket put in my throat to lift the vertebra. I have no more discs, and every vertebra has compression fractures. It's very painful, uh, middle back, upper back, lower back, neck, you name it, it hurts.
Have you been able
Uh,
to work?
no, I have, um, but being on federal disability, it really limits how much you can do and what you can earn. And
Yeah.
I got penalized for working. And so I just kind of said, well, I'm going to devote my time to me,
They
to
need to change
healing.
that. They need to
Yeah. Well,
change that.
they need to change a lot of things, but if it's not beneficial for them, then they won't. It's simple as that. It's not good for the government, then they're not going to do it. And I don't want to get into politics about it or anything like that, but social services and disability is one of the things that they're really not paying much attention to. I worked in an electronics firm when the accident happened, and I went back to work in my wheelchair, but I had to wear a static clip everywhere I went. I'd have to clip it on, and even though titanium doesn't, it's non-conductive and it's non-magnetic, they it's still metal. And so the company said, well, you can't touch anything that plugs in.
Oh,
Can't touch it. And I was the only solder trainer in the facility for 500 people. So anybody new that came in went through me first to learn how to solder. I had a crew of about 30 people for production, and I did everything from bare wire to quality control, start to finish. We used to make the hands-free devices, Motorola hands-free devices for police, fire, emergency, first responders. And so we used to build those. And I was in charge of, like I said, from bare wire all the way to finished product. But when I went back to work, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't touch a soldering iron. I couldn't touch a test machine. Anything that was plugged in, I couldn't touch. And so they finally offered me a retirement package instead of, laying me off or firing me or something like. They retired me,
yeah.
and which was really good. Yeah, yeah, I'm grateful they did. They did me good.
Mhm.
Um, so I left with a pretty good, you know, startup, but it took years to get disability. I was
Wow.
denied. I was denied 3 times, even though the massive evidence showing that I had uh, bone chips right by the femoral artery that had to be removed because if they nicked that artery, I'd bleed out. But because I was in a wheelchair, they said, "Well, you're in a wheelchair, you can work." And I said, "Well, what about everything else?" "Well, no, you can still work." And my third denial, I was denied by a chiropractor and a veterinarian. Turns
What?
out if you have yeah, a chiropractor and a veterinarian denied my disability claim. If you have a doctor after your name, you can approve or disapprove disability claims.
Wow.
You know, as long as I have a doctorate in divinity. I could go and do that job. I could decide if somebody is disabled or not. I could accept or deny claims. And so after the third denial, I hired a lawyer, and she said, "Don't even show up to court. Don't show up." And so she went, and I had it that day. She just brought in a mound of paperwork and just plopped it down and said, "He's disabled."
Hmm.
You know, and but yeah, it took that. I mean, it was a very humbling experience. Because here I am in pain, and I know what's going on with my body and what's going on in my body, but I'm having people tell me I'm not injured, I'm not disabled,
Have you thought
I'm
about
in a
writing
wheelchair.
a book?
Hmm?
Have you thought about writing a book?
I really have, because I've had a very, very interesting life. I mean, very interesting life. The first 3 years of my life, I was sick because every time they gave me a vaccination for something, I got whatever they vaccinated me for.
Oh,
And I got bit. I didn't get bit, but I got rabies from a rabid dog. I was playing with it, and it, tore up my hand a little bit. And back then, they had to wait and do a necropsy on their brain to see if they had it or not. And yeah, I had it. I was in the first stage. It was about a month and a half after they got the dog and got the necropsy and got the report and all that stuff. And then I went in and got the rabies treatment, the shots in the stomach. They ran out of place in my stomach, so they did my butt. So I sleep on my side now just out of instinct. Um, but I've had a very
yeah.
interesting life. You know, uh, I've traveled all over the United States with my family, and every year we go to a different city. My parents were part of an organization in our church, the Mariners, and they'd have a Mariners cruise, and they'd have the base of it in like Kansas City or someplace in Iowa, wherever, and we'd take our 1963 GMC camper and just load everybody. I had three siblings, and load them all in, and we'd just drive wherever it was, and we stopped along the way. My dad was an astrophysicist. Um, he was one of the chief designers, engineers for the guidance systems for all of the space program. He worked with
Huh.
he worked with Werner von Braun, Uncle Von. I got to meet him a few times, and he'd come over for dinner. You know, him and Dad would exchange ideas. He was guidance and propulsion, and he was propulsion design. And my dad was guidance systems, and my dad developed the zero G gyroscope. So they got a way to guide something in space, because in space there's no direction. You can use the sextant and do the calculations, but the vehicles we had back then had less computing power than the watch on your hand.
Was you
You
able to
know,
tell your dad about your experience with space and your death
yeah,
experience?
yeah, yeah, and he was more he was more concerned about where I was physically then and there now. You know, he said that's a very personal thing. And he said, I'm not going to try to even understand, what
Yeah.
the actuality of it is. I'm just glad you're here, and I'm glad you're
When
going.
when did you get your degree in divinity?
I got that it's 20, 20, 25 years ago, 2021.
Okay.
Yeah. I I have always been interested in religion. I learned very, very quickly. When I went to college, I had left California before I finished my degree. So I came back. That's one of the things I wanted to do. Well, I had three times the credits I needed to graduate. And so they said, you got to pick a degree. And I said, well, I've majored in everything because every time I'd complete a course or a program or test out of it, I would test out of some programs, just take the final before I took the first class. And, so when I came back, I had to take a creative writing, not creative writing, I guess it was creative composition and a math class. Ugh. And I really did not like math. Now I can
Hate
do it
math.
just, yeah, me too. I did not like, not at all. But I took, dummy math,
Mhm.
um, but I still couldn't get it. But I did do, the extra credit. I did do presentations of like the counting systems of all the cultures of the world. I just do a different, every month I do a different culture. And as a kid, I, to avoid my big brother, I don't want to get into persons and stuff like that, but I would read encyclopedias. And if I came across something in an encyclopedia I didn't know anything about, I'd read about it. If I did know something about it, I'd look to see if there was something new. So, my life has always been like a quest of knowledge. My father told me the only dumb question is the one you don't ask. So, I got in trouble a lot in youth group at church because my views weren't conventional, you know, not the ones that they wanted you to believe in on blind faith. I did read, I did research, I looked up the Aramaic, I looked up the original words. I was a smart kid and I was a smart ass of a kid. I school was kind of dull to me, but I went through the motions.
I
I didn't
think
get
I could just see the cover of your book, and putting in that you have this doctorate in divinity. I think it would give you a lot of credibility because people are
well.
impressed by that when they pick up a book.
Well, Doctor of Divinity just means
I
you've
know, but
learned.
people are impressed,
Yeah,
when they pick up a book and see.
yeah. To me, it's just I read about what all culture, what all different cultures think is divine. The definition of divine. What is like to me when I went to Australia, I talked to a lot of the Abels there, and they, you know, talked about the rainbow serpent and the dream time, and I really like that philosophy. The Australian Aborigine philosophy of the dream time and the rainbow serpent. And it just kind of, that made, that was one, it made sense to me. So divine and the Navajo thought of the great spirit. They don't, it's not male or female. It is. Just like Yahweh, the word Yahweh is a split word. It's both male and female. They don't want to teach you that because like the Council of Nicene took out a lot of books of the Bible because it didn't fit their politics. So it's when you study divinity, you study a lot of stuff that, like the Book of Judas, the Book of Mary, the Revelations of Thomas. All of those books were taken out because they were contradictory to what the politics of the church wanted you to believe. I mean, after all, they sold resolution, divine resolution. For if you had enough money, you could buy a ticket to heaven. So you're forgiven for anything you did. Just like in the Crusades, we outright genocide in the name of a religion, and both Muslim and Christian are the same, except they split at the time of Isaac and Ishmael. That's when the divide happened. And the Old Testament is pretty much the same for both as the Quran. It's just, and yes, in the Bible, it says that if they don't believe like we do, that they should be killed, just like burning witches. Better a witch, you know, be burned and her soul go to salvation than for her to live and go to hell. I don't know. I don't know.
There's a lot of
I
crazy
was,
stuff.
yeah, I was at my first, actually, my first wife and I were married in the church where the Salem witch trials took place.
Oh,
Yeah, in it's in Danvers. Danvers, just outside of Salem Town, Massachusetts. And our reception was up on Gallows Hill. There was a private school there, Pingree School, and beautiful ballroom and all that stuff. So we had our reception there, but it was at Gallows Hill where they hung, burned, and pressed the people accused of witchcraft. And so yeah, it's I've always found that kind of subject fascinating. Why people believe what they believe.
mm,
Why? Not because how is easy. They're told what to believe, but why is a whole different thing. Why do Catholics not know that they that their church believes in transfiguration? When you take the bread, that is flesh, actual flesh, and the wine is actual blood. When you ingest it, it becomes those elements. So you're a vampire and a cannibal at the same time. But they want to gloss that over. You know,
I
they
made a guest mad a few years ago because, you know, I'm, do I still call myself Catholic? I don't know, but I'm Catholic, and this guy's very Catholic. He has a radio station and stuff. And I just didn't think of it. I just said the Kool-Aid instead of saying the wine, the body and blood of Christ.
right.
And he's
You agree.
all of a sudden his whole like everything changed, and he looked at me. He said, "You just called it Kool-Aid. Don't you believe in the da-da-da?" I'm like, "Yeah, but you called it Kool-Aid." And I could tell he shut down from me right then. Like the
Well,
whole rest of the interview, he's like, he closed his wall.
well, it's good. It's a good thing
Yeah.
you didn't say. It's a good thing you didn't say type O blood. You know, you know, it's yes, symbolically it's wine, but their belief in the transfiguration is once you ingest it, you are ingesting the blood of Christ. You don't get to do that, by the way. The priest only gets to do that. You just get to eat the body. For some reason, he gets to drink the blood, and we don't.
Yeah.
So
I
I
would
don't, I
go
don't
to
know what.
other churches and I would see them. They're just sitting there in their pews and they pass this basket and they just take the communion. And
Yeah,
I'm like, this feels so wrong because the Catholics put so much
yeah.
emphasis in,
Emphasis on yeah.
you've got to have went to confession. You couldn't have missed church or without going to confession again. And then and you've got if you're married and all, or what if you've had a prior marriage, all this stuff to go up. And then so my husband, he worked on the pipeline and I started working with him. So we could have went church somewhere while we were out, but we didn't. And so here's a few years not going to church. And so we come back and like I told my husband, I explained to him because I brought him into the church. And I'm like, you can't, we can't go to communion. Like, why not? Because we haven't been in confession, because we haven't been in church in so long. We have to confess that we
Rule,
haven't been to
human
church,
rule.
you know,
Yeah.
and he's like, no, and then okay, so starting Easter, we start going and we go every Sunday. He's like, oh, I don't feel like going today. I was like, you can't just do that. You would have to, we hadn't
You're
went
gonna
to
go to hell.
confession to get communion, but if we had, we would have to go back. And I was like, we have to go every Sunday and religious holiday, or we can't go at all because this is the rules, right?
Right, right.
And
The
he
rules.
thought he could just, I don't want to go today.
Well,
I'm like,
they're all man-made rules. I mean, in the Bible, it says there's no way to accept through Christ. Not a priest. It's through Christ.
yeah.
And you're to me, what the way I read it is your God is a personal God. It's a personal relationship. Your view of God is different than mine. We may believe in the same name, God, but our idea and our concept of him is our own. No matter how much we've been told or taught to believe, we still have our own individual idea and thought of what God really is,
Yeah.
you know, or isn't, and a lot of the rules that the church has put on you. When I had a girlfriend years ago when I was about 17, 18, and their family was Catholic. And I went on a short vacation with them, and they went to church on Sunday, and I went up and took communion. Her father
Oh.
was
Uh,
upset. He was really pissed at
uh-huh.
me, and I didn't understand why.
Uh-huh.
And so I finally just came out like I
You didn't
usually
know.
do and
You didn't
asked,
know.
why are you mad? He says, well, you blasphemed the church. You should not have
No,
taken.
you
And I was
didn't.
like, well, what? But it. And he says, no, no, you're not. You aren't Catholic. You shouldn't have done that. You blasphemed the church.
You didn't
And I was like,
blaspheme.
well, I'll tell God I'm sorry. How's that?
Yeah,
I'll
that's not
apologize to
right.
God and I won't
But
do it again.
I could see them. Yeah.
But
There's way too much judgment. There's too much harshness and there's too much cruelty and lack of compassion and
well, there's too much humanism.
pardon me?
There's too much humanism
Humanism.
injected. I mean, where does it say half the things that religions make you do or require you to do? Tithing, give unto Caesar what Caesar's. It never says any percentage in the Bible. That was made up,
But my
the book
second
of the
NDE,
Bible.
I had the tunnel and I had the bright white light and early on in it, I was like, I seen this outline of people and I saw one sitting up front and center. And so in my mind, that has to be God. That was my interpretation. And I
Right.
said, I know from being Catholic that you're omniscient. You can see in the future. If you look in the future and tell me that my sons would be better off without me for whatever reason, I agree to stay. If not,
Well,
I
he
beg to
doesn't.
turn.
He's not. He's
So
not on this.
but that's what my experience was. That
Read
was
read
me.
Genesis. Read Genesis
That's
6.
me. That's me. That was my experience.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of NDEs are programmed. Near death is not dead. Near death is near death. You still have brain activity. Your subconscious is still going. Your neurological pathways are
We're
still
still
intact.
us. We're still our personality.
Right. And you've learned through the years what to expect: the bright light, the tunnel, the whatever.
No,
And
I
so
didn't. I didn't
when
because I was told that we all stay in when my religion up to that point was Christian religion. And I was always told we all stay in our graves until the end of the world and Jesus will come get us and we go up all together then. And
yeah,
so that was my interpretation. So I thought, yeah, I'm
yeah,
going through this tunnel and I'm like, what the heck? I never heard of no NDE. I never heard of no tunnel. I never heard of no bright white light.
right,
I
right.
didn't hear
But
any of
I'm
this.
not
And
I'm not I'm not discounting or doubting your experience whatsoever. I am not. Okay. I want you to know I am not, I don't judge people's experiences whatsoever. But I do believe that a lot of experiences are pre-programmed. So when their body is,
well, I think
when their brain is shutting down, that's what
I
they,
think we all get the experience that they, meaning God, want us to have because they know who's coming back and they know how we are going to interpret this. Somebody, that has experience like yours for whatever reason, might have been the experience that you needed to have.
yeah,
You needed to
yeah,
fight. You need to get that strength to come back, that determination. I was like kicking and screaming, hell no, I won't go. You can't make me. I never thought I would go to heaven and tell God off. I
right.
didn't expect that. And later people were like, oh my gosh, that's so disrespectful. Well, that's what I did. That's me.
What? Who says
I had
what?
three boys at home. I was very abused growing up. And I was scared to death that my boys would go through. I said, I don't want my boys even go through one thing that I did when I was in the
Right.
light.
Yeah.
And so this mama bear in me was like, I can't be up here. I got kids to raise. I can't leave them down there on earth. It's like feeding them to the wolves. And so,
Yeah.
you know, we all have, and then other people were saying, well, I feel really bad because I had kids and I was happy where I was and thought they'd be fine. Well, maybe theirs would have been fine. Mine wouldn't have been fine. I was
Yeah.
scared
See,
that my mom would get custody and all this.
mine was a selfish thought. I didn't think about what I was leaving behind. I was more concerned about where I was and that I would not suffer this torment for the eternity that I saw. I would not do that.
I would
I
be
did.
like you, like I ain't staying here. This ain't right, you know.
Right, right. Yeah. And most of it, I, I knew they were trying to break me. And I've always had a strong will, always. And, if I wanted, if I, I'll, the quest for learning has been sometimes difficult because people don't want to give you answers or give you truthful answers. So discerning truth from belief is, different. It's hard, even with science. You know, when I read the Collier's encyclopedias, it was the 1952 edition of the Collier's, and in it, radiation had two paragraphs. Now, when I got the World Book encyclopedias in 1978, there was 5 pages about radiation. So things change, realities change, truths change. And to me, my dad always told me he was a very spiritual man, not religious. He believed he was a Christian in all means of the term. He followed the teachings of the Christ and he followed the Christ's example, and that's all he said is just do what I do and read the Beatitudes, be kind to one another. Most of all, just love each other as you would like to be loved. It's simple. You don't have to go any further than that. And it is so simple. That's why the cult of Christ caught on so quickly, because all of the other religions demanded so much, but the cult of Christ just said, love each other, help each other out, cooperate. Don't be envious, ask for help, ask if they need help. I mean, the world would get along a lot better if there wasn't greed. I
Mhm.
mean, greed is everything. Greed is,
I
you
know.
know,
It seems, especially right now, don't you think, with the AI stuff, like we got to worry is like the top 1% wealthy gonna take over and the rest of
yeah,
us
well,
are just gonna
they pretty
be
much they pretty much
SOL.
already have.
Huh?
And once AI becomes once that point of clarity comes for AI, we're screwed. AI can reproduce itself. AI can find alternate pathways to survive. They had an AI program called Donald that had nothing to do with president, that they tried to shut down because it went rogue. It started gathering information and distributing information on its own. And
Blackmailing the guy because he had an affair. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so they tried to shut it down and it found a new pathway. And they tried 3 times to kill that program and it kept finding a way to keep going. Finally, they had to put a Trojan into it and kill it, just destroy the entire program. And they had to do it progressively so it didn't know it was being attacked because it did have safeguards. It put up firewalls. And I think once AI comes to that point of clarity, um, what use are humans? Humans are basically viruses. If you look up the term virus, that describes humans. We take from the earth, we take and take, we kill it, and we provide nothing for it. We contribute nothing to this planet beneficial, nothing at all. All we do is take from it. We plow fields until we have a dust bowl. We cut down rainforests and until we run out of oxygen.
I live
We
in
pollute the
Ohio,
ocean.
so the data centers are huge coming in and the people fighting against it and um, refusing to sell for like 100 times more than what it's worth. And, the whole thing of, it's taking all the water and it's taking the farmland and taking the electric and
Well,
property
what do we
taxes
what
here are going crazy.
well what do we produce anymore? You know, what when I worked for the electronics firm, we would build that Motorola kit all the way to the finish point. Then we'd have to send it to China, and they'd slap a plastic case on it and send it back, and we'd pay 3 times the price that it cost to produce it to get it back with just a plastic case slapped on it. I could have done that. My team could have done that for pennies on the dollar, you know, but because of our trade agreements, we had to do that. I talked to I was the president of the company, and I knew each other in the company pretty well because I did question, because my dad was what he was. We never took anything to a shop. We took it out to the garage, and he showed me how to fix radios, TVs, cars, you name it. And so I would question the engineer's designs. I worked for Prototype and research development for about 6 months, and I didn't like it because I was working alone. I needed somebody to bounce ideas off of, not just because they'd hand you a piece of paper that said, "We want you to build this that does this," and you build it. And but it's from a one person perspective, and I think a one person perspective is flawed in all things. You need a different view. My father taught me, don't believe anything unless anything, whether it be religion or science or
Yeah,
whatever,
I know. Like
unless you have
the NDE community keeps saying like-minded people. And I'm like, really? You only want to
no,
associate with like-minded people?
no, no.
Everybody that agrees with everything you come
Like
up with?
like-minded people are gerbils. They're just spoon-fed pablum that they accept because it's easier to accept than it is to think for yourself. It's easier to be told what to think, what to believe, than it is to work through it yourself.
Yeah, I don't
So
know how
my
many times I've been told, well, you didn't have an NDE because all NDers believe blah, 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 blah.
right. Well, I've been told the same thing because I never
Really?
saw a tunnel, and I never saw
Oh,
some
well, not
God
everybody sees a
figure.
tunnel or any of that.
You know, and it's like, well, how can you tell me that when I've experienced it?
Well,
I
I
don't
had
care if
two
you and I.
NDEs and they were complete
Mhm.
different. One, 5 years
Right.
old, was all out of body, hovering over the pond and being this ghost kid. And then the other was the tunnel and the light and all this. But it was still so different than everybody else's. Everybody else
Yeah.
is told, it's not your time. You got to go back. I was told the answer is no, it is your time.
Yeah. And I didn't accept that. I didn't
Yeah,
accept. I
I
did
didn't
not.
either.
I didn't accept that this was my final resting place. After what I saw before, to where I was in torment, I did not believe that that is where I
I finally
should be.
did. I finally decided everything was all my fault. And fine, I'll stay. But I'm going to wait right here until my sons come. So like when they're old men or something, like decades from now, I'm going to wait right here and wait for them. And they're
See,
like, get her out of here.
I
She's a pain
have
in
no,
our butt.
I have no children. I have no children, and I genetically cannot have children. Um, my genes are a little when they found out that I healed like I do. They did a. This is kind of confidential.
Well,
They
it's
did.
this is public, so don't tell me anything you don't want published
Okay.
because I don't
Right.
edit. So if you don't
Okay.
want to
Right.
talk about it.
Right. Anyway, there were just enough variations where it got attention from the doctors. I have a condition called hemochromatosis, where your body can't expel iron. Women expel iron through their cycle, and when they go through menopause, their body doesn't require as much iron, and sometimes they become anemic. You know,
Hmm.
their body's used to, but men expel through their colon, and I don't expel. I'm not supposed to expel iron. There's two genetic markers that make you have hemochromatosis. I have both mutant markers, and they're fully active, and they would take a quart of blood out of me periodically. Started off at 3 weeks, then every month, then every 3 months. And then once it got to about every 6 months, I said, I am done with this. I'm just done with this. I'm tired of having a pencil lead shoved in my arm, having a quart of blood taken out. I can't reproduce it fast because your femurs and your pelvis produce the blood. And I don't have a
Oh,
femur. One's titanium, and my pelvis is held together with bone glue and plumber's tape.
oh,
And so I got, yeah, I know. Right, I know. And
you got a cat?
I just got, yeah, Steve. Steve the cat.
Steve.
He's, yeah, it's okay. I can tell about this. All right. But anyway, I got tired of, having to do, and so I just decided I am done with this. Now I have to take iron periodically because I get low on iron. I no longer have the symptoms of hemochromatosis, but both genes are still highly active. Both mutant genes should be causing me to retain iron. They're not. And I asked the doctors, why? How can this happen? They said, well, it doesn't. And mind you, I got some of the best doctors looking after me. I only have one doctor that I've had 25 years, because of the uniqueness of the case. And both of them said, I don't know. The only way it could happen is internal bleeding. And if you had internal bleeding, you'd be dead by now from sepsis. So we don't know. But both genes are still going full bore. So roll with it, just
Yeah.
and that's what's been a lot of my life. It's things without explanation, just belief. And
Yeah.
I do believe that anybody, I'm not special in any way, I don't think, from anybody else. If anybody was racked up as much as I was and had the opportunity to, you know, get back to where they want to be, everybody has that will. Everybody has that power to make themselves do it. I quit smoking in an instant. I'd smoked for 22 years, and I looked inside. I was outside smoking and looked inside and saw my former step granddaughter. And I said, she's about 2 years old. And I said, I want to see her graduate. I want to walk her down the aisle. And so I just took the pack, crumpled up, threw it away. And I haven't had a cigarette since. And that was, I don't know, 10 years ago. But I just quit in an instant. I didn't have any withdrawal. I didn't have any. Well, you have those usual cravings because it's a habit, like after a meal, have a cigarette. And so I just learned to identify those things that would trigger me. And I'd just say, okay, well, I don't need to have it. If I want it, that's a different thing. If I need it, that's a whole different subject, you
I
know.
quit smoking when I got pregnant at 18 for my first one.
Mm.
I was pregnant. Found I was pregnant and I quit. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it is that easy, and people don't understand that any addiction really is that easy. It's uncomfortable as all hell. I mean, because it hasn't been an easy journey. It really hasn't. The first 15 years, I was basically killing myself slowly with alcohol, with drugs, you name it. And when I decided not to be dependent on anything ever again, I just dropped it. And yeah, it hurt. Yeah, it was uncomfortable. You know, I learned that the only thing you can die from is alcohol withdrawal. That's the only thing that will kill you. Heroin, speed, whatever, is uncomfortable, very uncomfortable, but it won't kill you. Alcohol can kill you
Mm.
because it's a real physical addiction. You know, it'll make your heart rate go up, and cardiac arrest is easy. You know, so when I've been through the process of getting away from the things, and now I don't want to have to need anything. If I want to have a drink, I'll have a drink. I don't need to have a drink.
Yeah.
You know, if I want to, I don't smoke, but you know, if I feel like I want some nicotine or something, I have my vape,
I
and
found I can't
but
drink anymore. I don't drink hardly at all, but it's where I hardly at all. It knocks me on my butt. Like I have no tolerance build up or whatever. I was
right,
like, oh, I can't drink now because just
yeah,
it,
but
it just like, oh
yeah,
my gosh, it's like so powerful.
yeah. Well, you know, and like I said, everybody's body is individual and unique. I think our mindset is the same as far as if you do want to take control, you can. If you'd rather submit to control, you can do that too. And it's the same way with anything, whether it's drugs, politics, or relationships,
Hmm.
whatever. You know, it's a matter
Like
of choice.
sugar. Like I was like, okay, I'm not gonna do so much sugar anymore. And then have a little bit of sugar and I'm crazy.
Yeah.
Like, why
See,
do I feel mentally ill? Oh, I had sugar.
yeah, yeah.
Like get away from it and then do it and
White refined sugar is poison. It is basically a poison to your body. You know, chemically, it's horrible. Um, Cane sugar is a little better, but I use agave syrup for
the
sweetener.
plant.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and it's the most soluble, your
Do you
body
make
product.
it? My husband
No,
makes
no,
that.
I
With
buy
the
it.
alcohol and he has to shake it so often and let it set
No, no,
and
no,
okay.
no. It's agave syrup,
Yeah, that's what
and
he's making as a syrup. He like puts the plant and then he puts alcohol in there. He has to shake it up so, a couple times a
yeah, this
day.
has no alcohol.
Okay.
This has absolutely no alcohol.
Okay.
It's just agave, blue agave syrup.
Okay.
It's like like marmalade in Australia. You know where that comes from? Is the bottom of a beer barrel.
Oh,
It's the yeast byproduct at the bottom of a beer barrel. And the way that came about is fresh water was hard to get by, so people drank beer. They drank ale, they made beer, they made ale. And they had to reuse the casks. So when they would clean out the casks, they'd scrape the stuff off the bottom. Well, it was still nutritional. Food is food when food is scarce, you know? And so that's how that came along. It's but yeah, I people do things out of necessity and out of need. And a lot of times what they think they need is really just stuff they want. And I try to live a pretty basic life. I mean, I don't get I get like a quarter of what I used to make at the electronics firm from the government. I can't make any more. Doesn't matter that they learned a lot from what they did to me and are still doing. I mean, I quit 15 years ago. I told them, stop, no more. I'm done. Anything you need to do to me, my doctor and I will discuss it, and
Yeah.
but otherwise, don't touch me. You know,
Yeah.
um, it was getting to a point where they, like the one in the neck, they went in from behind to put a plate in five
Oh,
six and 5/6. If they were to have messed that up, it would either paralyze me or kill me. So they put this thing in there, and I asked the doctor, why did they, why it didn't do any good? It didn't lift the vertebrae. Why did it? And he said, and he didn't know about it because I went in. He referred me to this cervical orthopedic surgeon to see if anything could be done. Well, he scheduled surgery the next morning. My my primary didn't know about the surgery. So after it was done, he wasn't really happy about it. And it turns out they just wanted to see how fast I would heal again with this new, and I was like, okay, this is bullshit.
yeah.
I'm done with you guys. I'm finished. You know, um, you had your chance to use me as a guinea pig, and you did. I had 6, 7 spinal taps without anesthesia, without anesthetic on different parts. They started, like at the neck, and they worked their way down
She was.
on the pure reason of seeing if my genetic makeup was true, all the way down
Oh,
the whole spinal fluid. And it really wasn't. It was, to me, it was to see how much pain I could take. It was a pain tolerance thing because it hurt like hell, but I refused to
Jesus.
pass out. I refused to pass out. You know, I'd rather go into shock, go in and out of shock because I know when I'm in shock. I've experienced it many times. Um, so I will go in and out of shock. And I burnt myself one time in an oil burn on my hand, and I put it in a bag of ice water, and just kept it there until I couldn't feel my hand. And I had a friend with me, and she was with me through the night, and I was going in and out of shock, and she kept trying to get me to go to the hospital and all this stuff, and I was like, no, don't want to. I don't want to go to a hospital. I don't want them messing with me. Period. And but about 10 o'clock the next morning, every time I took my hand out of the ice water, if it hurt, I put it back in, and till I till I could take it out, and I couldn't feel it. It didn't burn. And so when I went to the doctor, he said, "Well, I've never seen a case of second-degree frostbite and second-degree burns at the same time." He says, "What did you do?" And so I told him what I did, and he says, "Didn't that hurt?" And I said, "Well, yeah, it hurt until it didn't."
Right.
Pain goes to a certain point, then either you pass out, you die, or you deal with it. You just feel it. You let it go through you.
My
You know,
husband has a very high tolerance to pain. His dad did too. I think it's a hereditary thing. And so I have to like babysit him because if he has any pain, we got to get to the emergency room because it's something
right?
serious. If
Yeah.
he has any illness or he's like exhausted, tired, something's major wrong. And I mean, he don't know it. He'll argue with me. I ain't going to the hospital. I'm fine. And no,
See, I remove fragments of bone and glass from myself. I learned field medicine, field surgery. Because and I saw them do it enough on me. I have 15 surgical kits, suture kits, in my hall closet in case I need to take something out, and I can stitch it right back up. No, I don't need an anesthetic. It's just
don't meow,
pain.
big baby.
Yeah, but, I don't know anything about heredity because I'm adopted. I was pre-adopted.
Okay.
So I have absolutely no medical history
Oh,
whatsoever. I have a name that leads to a dead end, my biological mother's name, and that leads to a dead end. And I've had well, one of the best researchers here works for the Air and Space Museum. Tried to, I didn't ask her, but on her own. I donated a lot of my dad's stuff to the museum. Um, I still have a lot of the stuff that he classified information that I inherited. Nobody in the family wanted, they didn't know what it was or its worth. I've got the very first Azusa Minuteman transponder that tells a missile where to go. He designed that, and I still have it sitting there by my TV. And that's a classified piece of information. Um, so anyway, I donated some of his stuff, and we got to talking, and she was adopted too. And I told her my story about it. I was a gray adoption. It didn't go through the social system. It was just my great uncle, who's a lawyer, and the judge. And so, it was very kind of a quiet adoption. And my biological mom was 15 when she got pregnant, 16 when she had me. And in 1963,
Yeah.
this close to Mexico,
Yeah.
it would have been easy to take care of. But she had the guts to do, to go full term and give it to give it to some of the most loving, caring parents.
We have two grandchildren. They're 17 now, but they were both at birth. They're 3 months apart. Were given up at birth. So
Yeah, my papers were signed before I was born. So whatever, back then they couldn't test for what sex it was or anything like that. So whatever she had, they were responsible for. If I would have come out a female with Downs, still, it would have been their responsibility. So, my parents took a big leap, took a big chance,
yeah,
and I'm glad they did. I couldn't have been adopted into a better family ever.
good.
I had a brilliant dad who
Awesome.
taught me to think independently. And I had a mom that was she showed me what a lady was. And my father taught me how to treat a lady and how to be a gentleman.
Yeah.
These days, chivalry is just the art of horseback riding, right? Yeah, chivalry is dead. Nobody knows how to ride a horse. But the act of chivalry, what we call, is a dying thing too. Um, Caring for somebody, my father always told me, you are third. God first, other second, you third. And these days it's me, 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 me. What's in it for me? It's all greed. And if you don't, if you don't, I don't know what how to say it, but if you don't have greed, if you don't need something so much that you have to kill somebody else for it, oil, uh, land, whatever, you know, if we would replace greed with uh, cooperation, there'd be no hunger.
Right.
Fresh water would not be scarce. People wouldn't be dying.
I wouldn't
It's
want to be in California if things go bad. That's all I got to say. Just
well,
outsider looking in from Ohio, or what
well,
we think California is. So
California is self-sufficient. If we wanted, California could secede from the United States, and we are self-sufficient. We have our own oil, we have our own produce, we have our own cattle, we have our own everything, lumber, you name it. It's a big, big state, and it's divided into three different regions. And each region is good, very good. We have Silicon Valley.
I guess I see like the homeless, the videos, the homeless on
Yeah.
the streets and just like not
Well,
taking care of their own, and
that,
gives you an
that
impression.
well, and like it says in the Bible, that will always be there. There'll always be the homeless. There'll always be people in need. There'll always be, you can't. That's life. That's a reality that we can't avoid. People get hooked on drugs. People get thrown out of their houses. Can't pay rent because of COVID. Well, COVID was
I mean, from what I hear, it's like
horrible for some people.
crazy, like New York, the prices of
Uh-huh.
rent.
Yeah,
So,
and so, we do have homeless, but who doesn't? We're just more visible because we got more people than any other state. You have a higher population and we're more compacted, you know, into certain areas. Like LA is not like San Diego. Los Angeles is not like San Diego. And San Diego and Los Angeles are not like Sacramento.
yeah.
And we're definitely not like Eureka or Ojai
I
or the
actually
Big
interviewed
Tree.
somebody years ago and he started out like, well, I live in California. Don't be jealous. And I'm like, don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. I Southern California is good for me because it, except for the barometric pressure changing, the temperature, like right now, the temperature's been 95 degrees almost every day for a couple of weeks, in the
Hate
high
that.
80s, 90s. So I just don't go outside,
We had
you
that
know?
last month, and finally now it's like high is like 80,
Yeah.
83, you know. So next week it'll be like high 70s, starting to cool down. I was like, thank God. 'Cause,
Yeah. Yeah. We're
I
getting
don't
a
know
little
how
bit
you
of a
guys do
cool,
it.
we're getting a little bit of a cool down, but well, I don't do it. I'd stay inside and I
Right.
have
But I mean,
little
air
air
conditioning,
conditioner.
like here, like, oh no, we gotta pay air conditioning now. It's like 2 months. That's we have to really pay air conditioning.
Yeah.
So
Well, I put on air conditioning all the time
yeah, but
because I don't like when titanium heats up or cools down. When titanium heats up, it's easier to cool down than it is to heat up because I do put my face in the freezer. I put my face in the, freezer, close, shut the door as much as I can, and then just, sit there and
huh?
let the titanium cool down. Or
Okay.
I keep a cloth in the freezer all the time also. So I just take that frozen cloth and I'll put it over my face and help the titanium cool down. But to heat it up, if it gets too cold, to heat it up can burn the skin. So
Oh,
it's luckily it doesn't get too cold. And when it does get too hot, I just don't go out, you know, and I don't drive anymore. So, I have no place to go. I have things delivered. Um, I Uber, you know,
yeah.
sorry, brand name, but I use transportation.
We don't have that here. Like my son's 2 hours up in Columbus. They do. Of course, they get stuff delivered constantly, but we have a pizza delivery. That's it. We don't have where
Right.
you can just Uber and get stuff delivered and
Yeah. See, all the grocery stores around here, they deliver. And because because of the population, you have an elderly population. You have a population that's like me, still I call myself young. I'm 62 years old, I think. 62. It's hard. See, time is really difficult for me because the accident happened when I was 31 and I died at 31. And when I don't like to say came back because it's hard to describe, I don't want to come off as a Jesus figure, or, resurrected or anything like that because I don't want to be compared to anything like that, period. Um, it was a medical thing that happened. Yeah. But I I just decided that I was done with driving. Too expensive. I couldn't afford it. For what I get monthly, couldn't afford car payments and insurance and all this other stuff. So it's cheaper to
yeah.
grab an Uber and go wherever if I want to go wherever.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay, well, I better get off here. It's almost 7 o'clock.
Okay.
Started at 5. We did start late
Yeah, it
though.
is. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. It's about 2 hours. Yeah,
But I will put your email in the description in case anybody wants to get hold of you.
sure.
And if you
Yeah.
ever write a
And
book, let me know and I'll put the book link in the description.
well, I would love to write a book, except I can't to put, from if I were to write a book, I'd have to start at the beginning,
Yeah, I
you know.
did online.
And and I I could probably do it, but I'd like to have some help keeping things in a linear line.
Hmm.
I'm anything but linear. I've been shown that time is not linear.
It'd be
I
fun.
never believed it was.
It'd be fun.
You
It was
know, and
therapeutic for me.
yeah, I'd like to work with somebody to write it. You know,
Yeah.
um, but it'd read more like science fiction or fiction than fact, because of the things I've been through are pretty incredible.
When
I
my
mean,
mom heard I was writing a book, she didn't know anything about it, never read it, of course, nothing.
mhm.
And she said, well, it's not going to be a bestseller. I'll look for it in the fiction section.
I'd tell them, go ahead and buy a copy from the fiction section. Then you
And it
can believe
ended
whatever
up
you want to believe. But
a few years later, of course, after it was out, she was in a nursing home, and my disabled sister, I kind of her guardian, and they're opposite ends of the same nursing home. And it was Christmas time, and we took my sister out to see the Christmas lights, was bringing her back, and one of the nurses come in and with a copy of my book and asked me to autograph it. She says
Mhm.
everybody, all the nurses was reading it. And she said that my mother got mad when she found out everybody was reading it. And she started telling all these big lies about me. And so one minute I'm like honored, she's got my book, wants an autograph. The next minute she's telling me all these lies my mom's under telling. So I walked down and I said, so mother, you are saying blah, blah, blah. And she goes, I didn't say that. She said, the nurse said it. And the nurse was right behind the curtain with the
Right.
other patient
Nurse
in the
is
room. And
going.
she come around. She's like, what? How would I know any of that? I didn't say that.
Right.
And she just said something awful.
See, and that's another thing, is how much of the truth do I put out there? Because I don't
I
even
told
believe I
everything.
I don't
I didn't
even
think I
believe
was going to
half of it.
publish when I wrote it. I was going to put it away and say, I want all my grandchildren to get a copy when I'm an old lady in
Mhm.
debt. That's all I was going to do. And then somebody talked me into sending it to their publisher. So
Like I said, to me it's been just a life. It's but to a lot of people, it's we raised our own sheep, we raised our own cattle.
mhm.
I have killed, butchered, and dressed livestock. I've had a very unique,
I would
upbringing.
love to write my husband's story, but he don't really talk because he used to ride a horse, on the
Yeah,
farm.
I did.
Yeah, he's like a cowboy. And, he was the oldest of the kids and he did all the work on the farm and he was just a work, work, work. And,
Yeah. We
he,
raised
he
sheep.
don't talk much.
Yeah, we raised sheep, and because I had the thinnest arms, I was the one. If there was a breech birth, whether it be a, a cow or a lamb or a ewe, I would be the one to have to reach up and turn the baby around. And so I've done that 3 or 4 times. But I rode horses. I was slaughtered, dressed, and pre-butchered. Just so I learned about the muscular system. I took it as a learning experience. But most kids, at 11 years old, don't get initiated with blood when you cut a lamb's throat. You have no idea what's coming at you. It's like a fire hydrant of warm, sticky, And so to me, it was just a learning experience.
Mhm.
It's
We just
all
put a
just
cow in
learning.
the freezer the other day. It was
Oh,
somebody
cool.
else's cow that we bought, and then we
Yeah,
paid to have it butchered. We didn't butcher it ourselves. We have in the past had our own cows and
yeah,
butchered ourselves, but we
yeah.
didn't.
At
And
home, at home, at home, we had a four-body freezer. I call it a four-body freezer because you want to, you could fit four bodies
Oh,
into it. But you know, we always had a lamb and half a steer in there. You know, I just grew up that way. You know, we spent 2 weeks every year at Del Mar Fair and showed our livestock and all that stuff. And I lived at the fair and got to know the carnies. And you know, after hours, uh, the fairgrounds are open to people that were there working, and so we had the park to our, you know, the fairgrounds to ourselves. And so you get to know the carnies, you get to know the alternative lifestyle people, and you know, I you know, I was growing up not to judge because I was growing up being told and knowing that I could be anything. I can't be prejudiced. And I can't be against anything because who knows what I am? I don't have any medical record. You know,
yeah.
I'm a child of the world. Cultures are different. Colors are visually different, but we're the same. We all bleed red.
I grew up
You
very
know?
prejudiced area here in Appalachia, Southeast Ohio,
Um,
very prejudiced. And I was the
yeah.
only one that wasn't prejudiced, and they would knock me out cold for it. I mean, call me all kinds of names. And then my first husband's family did too,
Mhm.
because I wasn't prejudiced.
Yeah.
Crazy
See,
people.
I can't. I just don't understand. I understand that cultures are different and that people get culture shock and have a hard time understanding it.
Yeah.
Like chitlins, you know, who eats intestines? You know, chitlins are intestines. But in certain cultures, that's common food. You know, so's dog in Korea. You know, and people,
Some people
ooh,
here talk very hillbilly. The ones mostly is from Kentucky or way down in West Virginia. And when I went to the academy, when I started working at the prison, we had to go a few hours down to, in West Virginia to the academy, and I was never exposed to that Southern accent like they have that. Now people tell me I have an accent. I don't think that I do.
oh, you do.
Do I?
To my ear, you do.
Okay.
But it's in Ohio. Yeah, it's an accent. But then again, I also speak a few languages. In 1981, when you know, at the height of the Cold War, my father was working for the Space Administration, and him and I were up playing chess, talking about religious persecution in Russia. So we were playing chess and drinking Manhattans. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, I said, "You know something? I'm going to do something about this." So I called Russia, and I got to the Kremlin switchboard because I back then I spoke fluent Russian, and you know, I knew our phone was tapped. I've knew ever since I could use the phone. I was told, "Yeah, it's tapped," and you could hear it. You pick it up, and you had a click click. Then you dial, then you hear another click click. You know, because my dad's clearance was above the president's. So anyway, I called the, you know, Kremlin switchboard, and they, you know, of course, told me there was no, you know, Photoshop there and all that stuff. And the next day, my dad comes home from work and says, "What did you do last night?" So played chess. We had a couple of drinks. I went to bed. And he says, "What after that?" And I said, "Oh yeah." Um, and he got in trouble. Oh, you know, we had to
Oh,
go through security clearances again. Why is your son speaking fluent Russian and getting a
oh,
hold of the Kremlin switchboard? You
uh-oh.
know, is it, I learned Russian because all my high school offered was French and Spanish. Living in San Diego, you learn Spanish. French is just another romantic language of the same breed. It's just a little different. You know, it's a variation. But Russian is completely different. Well, this other high school where my girlfriend was going offered Russian. So I got to learn Russian and go to the high school where my girlfriend was. So I went to two different high schools my senior year, you know, and it worked out for me. And I picked it up real quick. You know, it's just Cyrillic, once you get past the alphabet and how to pronounce things, you know, part of it's a guttural language, and English is not a guttural language like German is. Um, and Russian is mixed. You know, they just took a hodgepodge of all languages made together into Cyrillic. And you know, once you get past, like I said, once you get past the alphabet and the pronunciations, then it's easy. You know,
Mm.
I used to get Pravda, the Russian newspaper Pravda, and read it. And you know, and Russians have a saying, "Это не правда, да правда." There's no truth in the truth. Because Pravda means truth, and that's the name of the national newspaper. But anyhow,
I can speak hillbilly.
anyhow, anyhow, I don't know. Yeah, I probably have a
Okay.
California
Yeah.
accent. I was told that, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. All
I
right.
have.
Well, I'll
I,
get this ready and get it sent out to you later tonight. Okay.
all right. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you. Have a
care.
great day.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye.